And let's keep going. Okay. So, welcome back.
Welcome back to another episode
of
As
Woo As
You Want.
Yeah!
Yes, it happened.
With Jeremiah,
Celine,
and Leslie.
All right, we're on a roll now.
Yeah, we did it.
So this is awesome. I'm like so comfy right now. Like I just want to listen to you talk.
Good talker.
It's so great.
Yeah. So this is a continuation of last week's episode.
Yeah.
With Leslie, and we're talking about astrology.
Yes. So if you have no idea what we're talking about, listen to the previous episode. Mm-hmm. So I do want to talk about the different archetypes of the planets. Mm-hmm. But before that, just to continue on what we were just talking about, I'm curious to know your perspective on... I think a lot of people, when they think of astrology, when they think of a lot of woo-woo stuff, it freaks them out a little bit because it messes with time. And it makes them feel like, oh, if I get a reading, it means things are predetermined, or, stuff about fate or free will. So I'm just curious, when you're reading a chart, what's your take on fate? What's your take on predetermination? What's your take on free will related to astrology?
Yeah, I mean, that's an amazing question, because this is something I think about all the time.
Okay, cool.
Because I do, Yogananda. Yogananda.
My guy.
Your guy.
Part of his book talks about, I think he says 75% of our life's already planned. The rest of it is tweaking it and changing it. And that's kind of that idea that, oh, you're going to meet this person and you're going to do this experience and you're going to be here. And kind of that there are certain things that are going to play out. And there's a really interesting book called Your Soul's Plan. And it's written by this guy who did hypnotherapy and past life regression. And he was working with a line of clients, and he started to see these kind of like stories about people going into their pre-birth plan.
Cool, like your blueprint.
Wow. So he decided to have a couple of people that he was going to work with and kind of do these case studies. Mm-hmm. And then he invited, I think, 3 different medium, psychic, energy, intuitive people to read their energies. And the book is super fascinating because it talks about these people and their journey, but what their soul agreements were already. Some of these energy, psychic, intuitive people were already picking up on these stories that they were going to have and these experiences.
Wow.
So it really got me thinking about, how much of this is, how much is really, yes, we have free will of our choices every single day.
Right.
Mercury retrograde does not make us late. We are late. Don't
blame it on the transit.
Don't blame it on the transit, because you could have left earlier. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? So we have the choices. But what's fascinating for me is to see a person who comes to me, their chart, the alignments, and then what's going on in their life, and how it's so accurately described in the energy.
Wow.
And again, it's not, which is very, I think people get confused about astrology in that way, that it's going to predict this and it's going to say this, and I don't want to know about, but actually it's a description of the energy. Each person's story is unique. Mm-hmm. So when someone comes in and I look at their chart and I see their transit cycle and they have all this stuff going on with work, they sit down in front of me in their chart, their house of career, their 10th house, the indicators of work in their chart. They sit down and I just say, what's going on with work? And they're like, oh my God, you're a psychic. How do you know? And I'm just like, well, it's in your chart.
Yeah.
It's clear you're having a transit related to work right now. What is it?
Yeah.
I don't know the story ever.
Right.
So people at certain times in their life, I also feel like when we're talking about like free will and fate, if we have our map and we have our journey of what we want to experience here in life, right? And we're, if we get really far outside that arc, this is often when a lot of things happen intensely in our life. Disease, accidents, energies.
You mean when we stray outside of our story?
Our agreement, yeah, what we're here to do and what we're here to express. So then that also makes me think about, too, if like, oh, are we calling this event to us to get us back to something? An example in the book, which really just I think about so much, was the story of this woman who was like working in a university.
This is
Your Soul's Plan.
Your Soul's Plan.
She was working in a university, and she was in the mail office, in the mail room, and someone had mailed a bomb into the university, and it exploded in her face.
What?
And so she was terribly disfigured. And so the description in this book is that she had a karmic agreement with the man who sent the package. In a past life, she had used her beauty and her vanity in shadow.
Oh, boy.
And in this life, she had experienced what it was like to look different.
Shit.
So there's parts of this like,
take my headphones off for a second. I just need to breathe.
So this really makes me like think a lot about this in terms of seeing, a person coming to me, they have a certain transit, they have a life crisis, maybe their partner just died, and it's like, well, what's going on? And is that, was there always a moment when they were going to separate in this life? Was that part of their agreement? So it's kind of what you're asking about, but it's interesting to see like, well, what is, our free will, yes, and our choices, but then what experiences are going to shape our consciousness for us to evolve and grow through?
That's a theme, I think, in this podcast that we keep talking about, which I think is hard for a lot of people to swallow, is like the experiences you have in this lifetime can be really painful.
Yes.
And this idea that like
it's a soul agreement,
and that on some level, not at the conscious level, you agreed to it.
Right. Yes. Like bad things happening to you. Yes. And how do you like sit with that? And you're like, yes, I like chose to, be in this experience that's like tragic or abusive or really depressing and sad.
And then how does your experience of that energy change your consciousness? Right? And then when you evolve and you grow, and how does that change the energy too? Yeah, right. Exactly.
Well, and it's also interesting to think of it as, time is not linear, right? It's all happening now. So it's like sort of like that story of the woman with the vanity, and that, all of that is happening now in this like giant cosmic growth cycle.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing to think about in like that like karmic pattern that you're bringing in, that you can just, because when we talked, some karmic patterns I'm just holding, and you were like, you know what, they're not yours in this here and now, and you can let them go. And I was like, my mind exploded. Like, I don't need to carry that with me. And it was the most profound thing that anyone said in terms of karma.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, because, and that pattern was shaped by some experience. Right?
Yes.
And so we carry that energy with us always, right?
Yeah.
Through all our consciousnesses. So then if we have an experience, we change that consciousness. Often the very difficult, hardest moments in people's life always are like, oh, wow, this is how I grew, or this is what, this is the catalyst that went to this, change this or that. And a lot of times, even in my own life, I think, oh, like, wow, that was really perceived as bad at that moment. But obviously, like, whoa, best thing in some ways to help me understand myself better, grow, in different ways. Sure, super painful and intense, but then shifted my energy and my perspective of things into a different way of thinking, right? Or a different way of understanding.
Wowzers.
This is so great. Okay.
Yeah. We should ask. Well, I do want to know about, like, where did the concept that Pluto was, is that a transformational planet?
Yeah, Pluto.
So, but like, where's that information? Who made that up?
Yeah.
How does everyone know that? Or like Mercury's about communication and like all these. Where are the representations coming from?
Yeah, and astrology is ancient. Yeah. Thousands of years of practice. Astrology and astronomy were the same thing. Mostly before the church started to separate that energy. And that's right when astrology kind of became, like the woo-woo weird thing.
Yeah.
But astronomy is cool. Like it's science, right?
Yeah.
Where did the archetypes come from? There is no clear, people talk about Babylonia and Chaldeans and Egyptian energies and cultures. But how I think about it is that we're here on Earth, and for many, many, many lives and experiences, we just lived in harmony with the cycles of the seasons and the planets, right? This is how agriculture took off. This is how the energy, where do we go? Follow the North Star. Like we just lived by a language of the stars and the sun to survive.
Yeah.
Observation, I always say astrology is observation and correlation. Observation, correlation. That's how it really works. If I have somebody who comes in as more skeptical in a reading, literally in 5 minutes, they're like, okay, tell me more. Because it's the patterns, observation and correlation.
Right.
So if we're observing where the stars are and they map the zodiac at different times, we're correlating it to different energies here on Earth. And I feel like that's that language and that observation, and then understanding, well, what is the energy and what is the effect happening? Think about when eclipses happened, when people didn't know what an eclipse was.
Right, that was terrifying, probably.
It was terrifying.
Yeah.
The sky went dark, and everyone thought they were going to die. Okay, well, that had a strong impact in the collective consciousness. So now we understand, oh, well, eclipses are change times, they're made. So there's this level of what's happening in the impact in Earth, what's happening through the cycles of the seasons, what's that energy, we're observing things that are happening when we're calculating where things are. Those patterns and that energy is what has been passed down.
Okay, I get that. So it's like a reflection.
It's a
like
reflection.
Aries, spring, so that they're like dynamic, fiery people.
Yes, exactly. It's a
Right.
reflection of the connection, I think, to Earth and the movement of the planets, that those patterns. And then also, right now, it's very easy in many ways. Like, so things are hard, but being on Earth now,
you mean like 'cause
in
we
general,
have-
is easy in many different ways
To survive.
to survive.
Yeah.
When I look at it, for me now, I can look at the energy, what's happening today, and I just scan Google News and I make a correlation to the energies. So that observation and correlation is very easy now for people, astrologers, and people who are connecting to the energy. A lot of the analogy of astrology being the emotional weather, right? Astrology,
That's cool.
Yeah.
being the description of the emotional energies active,
Emotional weather.
especially the movement of the moon. and the moon's phases. Those, we've noticed those patterns, okay? And I think that's how thousands of years of that observation and correlation have been passed on.
Yeah.
I see. Right. So just to reiterate one more time, like, it's like if, I don't know, Saturn is in a certain place and we see that happening over and over again, we like keep seeing like, oh, this kind of energy is happening. So Saturn is representing this kind of.
Exactly.
I got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Huh.
Okay. Right.
That's
well,
cool.
because, you know, in the first episode of this podcast, I mentioned like my kind of entrance into woo-woo was an astrology reading, which I'll bring in like a personal little thing, but when Leslie read me, I'm experiencing a specific like Jupiter return, and that the last time that Jupiter was in, I think it was my second house. The last time I was there was 12 years ago, which is literally the first time I had my astrology reading, and like completely changed my perspective on all of this stuff. Because like I said, I was a complete skeptic. I thought this was total bullshit. It's like, I don't know how the planets relate to anything. But now what I tell people a lot of times is, if the moon can shift the ocean, and we're 70% water, think about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also interesting too, like maybe you don't even have to be very like woo-woo. You can just think of it mathematically in the representations of like energy.
Yeah.
And like looking in a chart. Because, you know, I think it's interesting. You can just look at something and be like, oh, so what's up with work?
Right.
Without any knowledge. And it's like a map, which is very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. We were talking in part one about all of those parts of how I came to be an astrologer, because what I wanted to say, a part of that was that astrology incorporated all of those things that I had studied. The math, the visual, and the psychology. That was also why I was like, oh, I get this. It puts together all of these things in that way for me. And so I think that the gift too is really, you know, like I said, the intention is remember who we are. We get so many programs, right? From our culture, our family, society, like everything about we should social media, do this, we did that. But what is your pattern? What is your energy? What are you here? So also in the chart and that expression, I feel like that information is just, when people get very skeptical or aren't sure about it, I think that there's so much charge around it. You know, when people talk about astrology,
right, it's like,
you know, they're like, oh, your horoscope and your sun sign. But that's also a very specific agenda, because if astrology is a tool of empowerment, there's a social construct that want to kind of keep everybody in a certain level of control.
Have you been noticing different like cyclical, you know, like there was an article from the New York Times that was like the Age of Aquarius is back.
David Brooks wrote an op-ed last week about like how like woo-woo's on the rise, and like millennials are
to like,
you know, like
and occult
I
stuff.
think Wicca is the fastest growing religion.
Oh wow.
I know, right?
Right now. So you know, he's a cis white male baby boomer, so obviously he has a specific perspective on this stuff. But you know, a lot of times Celine and I talk about how clearly there's something going on. There's something in the air related to the patriarchy, you know, the rise of the divine feminine. There's global warming happening. So I'm just curious if you have noticed any larger kind of cyclical things going on, and if you care to like share any of those observations with us.
Yeah, I mean, in 2026 and 2027, Pluto will move into the sign of Aquarius. So when we talk about ages, they're about 2,600 year long ages. And because we go through it, the dynamics of it is we kind of go backward through the procession of the zodiac. We're leaving the age of Pisces.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So the age of Pisces has been dominant, which is the age of the rise of religion and beliefs. All different systems, Buddhism, Muslim, Judaism, Christianism.
This is a 2,600 year cycle.
25 to 2,600 year cycle. That's what an age is, okay, in astrology. So what we are doing is exiting the age of Pisces. And that age, I feel like, was the consciousness of God is outside yourself. You know, you have to kind of in some way pray to some kind of thing that you will help you in some other way.
Right.
And so when people talk about the age of Aquarius, this is a new 25 to 26 year cycle. There's a lot of debate in astrology. Well, when does that start? People say, well, there's decades of changeover. Some people say, well, it takes 200 years to change over. Some, you know, there's a lot of different ideas. But in the 20th, 21st century, we see technology.
Yeah.
Since the beginning of industrialism.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And then in the 50s, the computer and IBM and all these things, we say, oh, we're really going into the age of Aquarius now. And when Pluto enters Aquarius, and Pluto takes about 240 some years to go through the whole zodiac of every sign, that's when most astrologers and people who look say, we're in the age of Aquarius. Okay. The age of Aquarius is about technology. Aquarius is humanitarian. It's global. It's all of us together. God is inside you. You are God. Your energy, your individuated self. Before Pisces also kind of puts everything into the masses, right? All together. And we go to mass. Right? Like a masses, right? Like this is that. So Aquarius is all about the individual and your freedom. To fly your freak flag and do what you want and connect.
It is Pride Month, so.
And to connect into what's for you, your individual. This is Aquarius, the freedom energy. So we're at the end of Pluto in Capricorn. And there's a really great book that I just want to mention called Cosmos and Psyche. It's by Richard Tarnas. It is like a 700-page book that just like goes through all the cycles of recent years and kind of what happens politically, the Renaissance, like what was going on. So he really was a history professor and wrote this book, The Western Mind, which became a textbook in universities. And he said he wrote that book to get credibility so that he could write this astrology.
Oh, that's so fucking cool.
Psyche,
that is so badass.
An amazing book about these patterns. So we're at the end of Pluto in Capricorn. Pluto, like you said, what is this energy? Well, the representation in archetypes, which you were asking before about the planet.
Yeah.
Each planet represents a different archetype. And when we talk about archetypes, like what do you think of when you say archetype?
I think of certain roles that like are common in like the entire world, like mom, dad, healer, warrior, all that.
Yeah. So those are understandings of like energy that no matter where you live, where you are, you understand mom, right? What culture, mom, right? Okay, these archetypes. So the planets are all of these different archetypes. Well, we're coming to the end of the cycle before Pluto gets into Aquarius, which is like the age of Aquarius really expressing itself. Pluto is in Capricorn. Capricorn rules, its patterning is around government. Its patterning is banking. Its patterning is structures, institutions. There's the whole things that we build and we control in our society. So Pluto moved into Capricorn in 2008 in the fall. And the very first thing that happened is the market crash.
Yep.
Since 2008, we've seen the fall of different government systems all over the world. One by one by one by one.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we are in kind of this, really turbulent time where things are like, Pluto wants to destroy the energies that aren't working. The structures that aren't really for the highest good. The structures that are bringing on too much control or not letting people be their individuated self. And that's the patriarchy energy of that kind of control and dominance. And Pluto says, now it's time for change.
Can I?
No, I was just like breathing.
Yeah.
I was like,
Everyone take.
big time.
So this is so fucking great. So I a couple questions interrelated. Do you know Michael Luton?
I do.
Okay. I assume you read his Horoscope USA in 2006, or maybe not. But he wrote an article in
Vanity Fair?
Yeah.
Yes. I've read that.
So he also talks about how America is reaching the end of its Pluto
Exactly.
cycle. Please expand on this, because when I read this, I was like, holy shit. He wrote this before Obama and Trump. Like, just it was pretty nutty.
Yeah. So just like every person has a birth chart, every country has a chart, every moment has a chart.
Cool. That's cool.
So in astrology, people call the Sibley chart the chart of the United States, which is born July 4th, 1776 in Philadelphia.
Oh, wow.
And there is a lot of astrologers who've done something called rectification, which work backwards, looking at specific events and how does it line up to come to a time. I think it's like, it might be around like 5 p.m. or what that time is. That is kind of an agreed upon understanding of the chart of the United States. So the United States creates itself and this republic and all of that from what they were experiencing in 1776. That's the birth of this country.
Yeah.
So that chart holds information about this country, right? Just it's a Cancer. It's a Cancer sign.
Oh my God, I've never thought
America's a Cancer.
It's
Oh my God, it
home,
has like a sun and a
family.
moon and everything.
Yeah.
Oh my God,
So
cute.
what happened is that Pluto was in Capricorn, and I think it's 22 degrees Capricorn at that moment. So what's coming up in the next couple years, because Pluto moves so slow, it only moves about a degree a year. Okay, a little bit more. So what's coming up is that America is having its Pluto return.
Oh.
So the symbol or the symbology connected to it, where are we control? What are we under control? What are the structures that are working? What are structures not working? And if we see the trend that's been going on for decades now, the trend is towards a what we say guidance and understanding who's really ruling stuff, corporations.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it's in Capricorn.
Business,
Right.
Capricorn, corporations. We see that the corporations are actually the ones who influence our laws more than the people. So we see the system of structures that have been created. In some ways, this is good, but now we're seeing, it's not so good.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the healthcare system. Oh, it's a mess.
Yeah.
Even educational system, what's going on?
Prison system.
Global
Financial system. I mean,
warming.
freaking everything.
Look at
Yeah.
all of our systems, especially in the United States. Like, what is like, we're kind of this projection of this country that has it all. Yet, I just got back from Seattle and I was like, I've been going there for years visiting friends, and I drove down I-5, and it was an entire tent city along I-5. It's the homeless population has exploded in the West Coast. San Francisco, LA, Seattle. We have a kind of projection of, oh, we're just here and everything. But what's really happening on the stuff is all stores are closing. Amazon has put everything out of business. Like the opiate epidemic. I mean, we just see how, whoa, things kind of feel a little out of control and a little unstable. And I think that's also hard right now for people being like, you know, wanting to care, wanting to do something, but then feeling all of this intensity.
Right.
That's because the systems have to change. They're not working.
So is it fair to say that these two things, this wrapping up of the age of Pluto in Pisces, along with the American Pluto return, they're kind of lining up around the same time?
The Pluto is finishing up its journey through Capricorn.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, and then we're ending the age of Pisces.
I see.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay.
Yeah, and that is always in astrology, what's the pattern? Those two things are big happening at the same time.
Yeah.
Right? So how do we see that expressing itself in our life as that, okay, time for change. Things have to change. I feel like that more and more as we see the shadow of our country and what's going on, then it's up to the surface for us to say, okay, what can we do to work on this or do better? And we're not going back to fix something that's broken. I talk a lot about how we are imagining a new future. Right?
We're creating something new.
We're creating something new. And I think that's exactly why all the woo-woo stuff,
I was just going to say that.
right, has become this whole surge and interest and energy. And
Well, it's like a power.
How are we going to imagine something different? And how am I going to, you know, if I talk to people who, you know, are over 40, 45, 50, you know, I explain in the chart and we talk about, I talk to somebody who's 21 and they're just like, boom, they got it in a second. And I'm like,
Yeah.
wow.
That's cool.
So there is this evolution of consciousness happening too.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, also, isn't there all those things about like indigo children and there's like different kind of generations of different consciousnesses being born?
Yeah, there's outer planets always speak to what is the generational makeup, right? And so we have, think about when Uranus, which is about our freedom and individuality, Uranus was in Scorpio for a long time, the 80s and the 90s. Okay, so we have these kids that now are growing up and they're like, okay, all of these things about gender and gender fluidity and what they want and how they express themselves in gender and sexuality and partners and polyamory and like all these different ways of relating to sexuality different. Uranus, different in the sign of Scorpio, sex when they were born. So their generation and all generations after them understand this consciousness of sexuality is different. Okay. Now, everyone before Uranus moved into Scorpio has to adapt that into their consciousness.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they weren't stamped in part of that energy.
Right.
So all the generations prior has to kind of, relate to it in some way. And I always feel like it's just like when your grandpa's like, when I was little, everything was 5 cents. And like, you're like, we didn't do that. And you're just like, okay.
Like, I order it online.
Yeah. You're like,
what?
Okay. Like, but that's a different generational belief of how to look at things.
Yeah. It's like constructs, which is so interesting.
Yeah.
It's very.
Right. Because to keep going on this, like the millennial generation, we all have, while when you look at a natal chart, there's certain planets that are obviously related to the individual, but then as you get further out of the solar system, certain planets start to overlap with like other generations or with the same generation.
Yes, we say the personal planets, the sun and the moon, the luminaries, Mercury, Venus, and Mars. They really shape our personality. They're the personal planets, and their energies are closest to Earth. Between Mars and Jupiter is a big gap in the solar system. And then we have Jupiter and Saturn hang out next to each other.
Yeah.
Jupiter's in a sign for 1 year. Saturn's in the sign for 2.5 years. Those two planets become social planets. Those are the planets of somebody in our grade, our same age.
Oh, wow.
Because they have...
This is fucking me up.
This is born...
I'm sorry I'm interrupting you, but like just thinking of the solar system as a body.
Yeah.
And your skin.
Yeah.
And we're talking about feng shui a couple episodes ago. And like this inner outer thing.
Yeah.
On other levels is fucking me up in an amazing way. I love it.
And then after Saturn, we have Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Those planets are generational. Right? Uranus will be in a sign for 7 years. A whole soul group will come in with Uranus in the same sign. Neptune will be in a sign for 14 years. A whole soul group will come in with that. Right now, what we're seeing in terms of our current president and our politics is the Pluto and Leo generation. They're all about the pageantry. Look at me. See what I did. I need applause. This Leo, like this Pluto and Leo generation. This is why the millennial generation is just like, what? You know, like there's such a really strong, as consciousness is changing, I feel like sometimes that divide is really intensified in this way.
It's like polarized.
It's polarized, yeah, because of this old constructs and these old beliefs that are just like so many people has surpassed that, but we still have these old systems that we go back, like so we have laws that go back to 18 something that has nothing to do with like our modern life in America. So it's interesting to me because I feel like a lot of that has to change too with this Pluto return.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's happening.
It's now.
We're
in it because Pluto moves so slow.
And it's been there for 200 years?
Well, Pluto is in Capricorn.
For America.
For when America's birth chart, Pluto was in Capricorn. And now, as of 2008, Pluto has returned to Capricorn.
Got it. Right.
But I believe it's either 20 or 22 where the United States Pluto is. Pluto is at about 19 now. So it has to get to the same degree.
3 more degrees.
Yeah. And so in the next 2 to 4 years is when the exact alignment happens out.
Just like around the next election cycle.
Divinely timed.
I didn't even think of that.
Oh, yeah.
Wild. I love how it can be micro and macro.
Yeah, I love you say that because I love that about it too.
Yeah,
it's the personal and the bigger picture, both, you know?
Yeah. And just the grouping of the planets. That's gonna stay with me for a while.
One thing, can I say one thing too
please.
about the millennial generation? In 88 and 89, there was a dynamic alignment in astrology. Neptune and Saturn and Uranus were all in an alignment together. And these are slow-moving planets. So to get all these guys in alignment are cycles of thousands and thousands of years. In 89, there was this incredible dynamic energy. And the biggest thing you can think of at that time is the Berlin Wall fell, right?
Yeah.
If you would say to people a week before the Berlin Wall's coming down, they would be like, you're crazy. Like, whoa. But, everybody was coming in through Hungary and the roll and all, like everything that was happening and the that wall. So it's also interesting now, some of the astrology is activating the energies of 88 and 89. This is why also it's so interesting we have all of these concepts of walls coming back, right?
Yeah.
But that generation, that soul group, I feel like had a really specific purpose. Capricorn is our structures we talked about, right? Uranus is change, Neptune is spiritual, and Saturn is we mean business. So that generation in those years, 88, 89, 90, like those years.
So what, they're like 19?
No,
they're
29.
Yeah, they're in their Saturn return.
AOC, man.
Yep, AOC is that generation.
Yeah.
They're all being activated now.
Thank God.
Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you.
Come on. We got you.
Yeah, we're here.
And
Wow.
that is the, I think, really beautiful time. I have a lot, actually, people who come to me for readings because
Sure.
they're like, "Hey, you know, I've been in this work and I've understood this. I've done this job for 3 years, and now I want to make everything sustainable." You know, like
Yeah.
like they're all like, we want to
That's
like
so nice to hear.
yeah,
It's
they're
really
all
nice to hear.
really seeing how, and you know, the other thing I feel like, and I don't want to be like, you know, our parents' generation, baby boomer, older generation, you know, they got sold on a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, microwave is going to be faster. Well, guess what?
Right. It's also
All the
growing.
nutrition's gone when you microwave
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, a TV dinner is going to be quicker.
Yeah.
That's not food.
Yeah.
Right.
Right? Like there's a lot of these intense things that our parents and that generation, but now we have dun dun dun, the internet.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And all of also these younger millennial generations see the story.
Right. They
Yeah.
know it all.
They know what's going on.
Yeah.
But I mean, say what you want about the baby boomers, but there was also the civil rights movement, you
Of
know,
course.
the 60s,
And the
like
60s astrology was
feminism and all
dynamic.
that
'Cause
stuff.
isn't there an
Yeah.
Age of Aquarius within that time too? Like,
Sure.
isn't that?
Yeah. And I feel like for me, when I think about the Age of Aquarius, is really the start of the Industrial Revolution, right? And the end of the 1800s and electricity.
Because it takes a long time to actualize into
Yes,
the space.
exactly.
Right. So it could take 200 or something.
yeah,
years.
and so since then, and so that was a part of it. And the astrology, interesting enough, the astrology of the late 60s, well, what that alignment happened at that time, the whole story picked up the almost exact alignments in a different way through 2012 and 2015, 11 and through 15. This is why Black Lives Matter, the
Yeah.
Arab Spring, all of these things
Me Too,
started,
all that
Me
stuff.
Too, all the stuff, continuation of the energy that was started in the 60s too. So yeah, there was that kind of rebel against the system. But then I feel like in the 70s and 80s and something, a lot of that's where that corporate energy kind of came
Right.
Oh,
More
totally.
money and
and
like,
took over.
yeah. The
Yeah.
80s
Right.
was just like lots of neon and
Garbage.
flash. It looked fun though.
Yeah. I mean,
Come
we're 80s kids, so
I know.
what about 83, 84? Are we special in any way?
Well, we're like,
We're a precursor.
yeah.
You're the precursor. You're
Yeah.
the bridge.
We're the bridge.
Because I'm the divide. I'm older, so I remember my phone like on the wall, like you know,
Well,
like
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
you
I
guys
get
do
that.
too. But I didn't have. There was no computers when I was in school.
I know. And I think there's something
In
really
high school,
significant
yeah.
about that. Like we all grew up without cell phones, without computers.
Yeah.
When we were
like
formative times.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
elementary school,
Yeah,
middle
whole
school.
different experience now.
Was there, maybe like the dial up was in middle school.
Right.
I don't even remember.
Yeah, I can remember being like, I wonder who's calling.
I love
Yeah.
that. I miss that.
I know.
I
Right.
love old stuff. I love faxing. I love rotary phones. I love writing letters. Like, I just like that.
Yeah.
But I do, yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
pretty
so I feel like this generation is like, okay, we have to imagine something different,
Like
you
the
know?
late 80s, early 90s.
Of like, oh, we saw how this and this and this, and now we see it doesn't work. What's the better way? How do we look at
Yeah.
this? How do we get everyone involved?
Yeah.
Right. And also, like in terms of Pluto, Pluto's ruled by Scorpio.
Yes.
And do you, when you do your astrology, do you talk at all about like deities? Because we talk a lot about like Kali, because Kali is also the death rebirth
Yeah.
energy, and I think is also related to Pluto.
Yeah, and there's all the different religions and different mythologies and Greek and Roman. They're all different associations with the planets. In each of them,
Right,
'Cause
right.
Pluto is also Hades. You know, it's also the Lord of the Underworld.
Well, it's
also
like death, too.
Yeah, death and transformation. So any expression in different belief systems that connect to death and has that connection in some ways in Pluto. I don't talk about that in readings because there also brings a certain level of, well, what's your belief? I mean, I do, which is like, it's hard because I do talk about reincarnation, which is a belief, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't really go into that different. I just stay with Pluto as being about transformation, where people can really kind of connect to that too. You know, if think, oh, death and rebirth. Okay, alchemy. What does that mean? How do you transform?
It's so funny. Some of the words you're using today are what we talked about in our last episode.
Yeah.
It's very interesting when things just line up in this way that you're like, oh, wow, this like really worked out.
Yeah.
Alchemy. Well, I feel like astrology at its root is just an alchemy.
Yeah.
And life is just an alchemy.
Yes.
And it's just figuring out the patterns to get you there. Which is wild. Do you have anything like top notch? I'm just kidding.
Do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah. Do you have anything you're like, oh, I'd love to say this?
You know, I love that to encourage people to get a reading in their chart, you know, if people have never had one.
Yeah.
Just because that there's so many different kind of parts of us that sometimes we're trying to figure out. And it's something, especially if somebody is really stuck or feeling, I don't know which way to go, or I'm like, astrology reading can be so helpful, and it can offer so many tools and so many gifts. And it's nothing to be scared about or like worried, oh my gosh, what are they going to say? And a lot of people kind of have this fear around it, you know, and I just love to talk about astrology, and I love to kind of, you know, encourage the beauty of it. And so I'm really always saying, like, if anyone is really having any kind of tough time, or they're learning to go to get a reading and to kind of connect with somebody to really understand your patterns and your cycles. I think it's such a benefit. A few years ago, about 5 years ago, I was like, oh, what do you do? I'm an astrologer. And people were just kind of like, oh, okay, and turn their chair the other way.
Yeah.
And kind of be like, oh, right. Today,
everyone's like,
tell me,
how can I find you
more? And like, tell me all about myself.
Yeah.
So
cool.
I just feel like it's this, you know, because we're in kind of this tumultuous time of transition and change of systems that we're working, and people can feel very lost, and they can feel overwhelmed, and they can feel the intensities, but astrology's the gift is always to like bring you back to yourself, right? And to say, okay, this is my thing, this is what's going on with me, this is what I need to focus more on. And so I feel like it's I just kind of like to, you know, talk and to that, to just say, hey, get a reading if you really feel stuck, because the other tools, we're going into super helpful hypnotherapy.
Yeah, I want to try that. I was saying that before.
Yeah, hypnotherapy is amazing and incredible.
Right.
I work with 3 hypnotherapists that I've done sessions with, but that I collaborate kind of with clients.
Wow.
And so what we do is we identify patterns, we talk about the chart, we kind of break down the energy, and then I send them off to get hypnotherapy. And the hypnotherapist helps work with them in the patterns.
Do you tell the hypnotherapist like the specific planet conjunctions, or you're just like, the pattern is like, you know, I'm having this self-worth thing or a difficulty speaking? Yeah. And that's always, I always with the client, like, ask if it's okay to share with the hypnotherapist. And they're always like, yeah, sure. The hypnotherapists that I work with have a really strong understanding of astrology. Okay.
So I do talk about specific alignments and specific planets with them, because they know astrology. Right. And so that also gives them another layer into how to help, because essentially what hypnotherapy is doing is reprogramming our brain. Right. How do you train your brain? Like, not easy. Yeah. Right? We got thoughts and patterns and all sorts of things and programs running. But when we get caught in loops, and when we get caught in constructs and ideas and things that don't work for us, we get looped into those energies, and then we create a lot of cyclical things in our life, and things don't really move or shift.
Yeah.
So hypnotherapy is super beneficial to change those patterns and kind of break out of those loops. So I feel like what I wanted to say is just about going into some of these alternative energy ways of looking at things. Majority of my sessions, people will be like, that's what my therapist said. And I'm like, yeah, in your chart.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like what I'd like to add, is just to encourage people to get a reading.
And how could people get a reading with you?
Oh, with me. I just tell you my email is the easiest way to, I like people just to email me.
Okay.
If they want a reading.
Okay.
It's ourcosmicday, OUR, cosmicday@gmail.com. It's also the same Instagram handle. Right now, last year, I took all my website down. In the next couple months, I will have it back up with my calendar on there.
Cool.
So people will be able to book through the site.
Cool.
But right now, if anyone wants a reading, they can just email me.
You should definitely email her.
Yeah.
It's like a game changer.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yay.
Wow. Well, this was freaking amazing.
Thank you so much.
Oh my God, thank you. I'm so grateful to be here. I really am, because I love talking about astrology, and just it's so amazing you guys bringing people into this program and to talk about these things.
Yeah.
Because this is how
yeah.
people learn, and people are, again, like you said, they're like, they don't know what it is, right?
Yeah.
And so like, how do we understand it? Well, from people having their expression of what their experience is, you know,
Yeah.
and talking about it. So thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Well.
Two goobers.
We
Wow.
hope everyone enjoyed that two-parter.
Yeah.
And we'll catch you on the flip side.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Love you.
Bye.